On the night of December 2nd, 1984, the residents of Bhopal, a city in central India, went to sleep like any other night. By dawn, thousands would be dead, and hundreds of thousands more would be injured in what remains the worst industrial disaster in human history. This is the story of the Bhopal gas tragedy, a preventable catastrophe born from negligence, cost-cutting, and a failure of responsibility that would leave a scar on an entire community for generations to come. Ultimately, a man in the United States would be charged with manslaughter, and millions of people would be begging for his extradition. Hello, and welcome to Deadliest Disasters. Bhopal, the capital of Madhya Pradesh state, was home to over 900,000 people in 1984. On the outskirts of the city stood a pesticide manufacturing plant owned by Union Carbide India Limited, known simply as UCIL. The company was majority owned by the American corporation Union Carbide, with Indian banks and Indian investors holding the remaining stake. The plant had been in operation since 1969, initially importing the chemicals needed for pesticide production. But in 1980, the facility began manufacturing methyl isocyanate on site, a highly toxic compound used as an intermediate in pesticide production. Methyl isocyanate, or MIC, is an extremely hazardous substance. Exposure to even small amounts can cause severe respiratory damage, blindness, and even death. The decision to manufacture MIC locally should have been accompanied by rigorous safety protocols. Instead, the opposite occurred. By the early 1980s, the Bhopal plant had become, in the words of one former medical officer, a case study in how not to do things. As the plant's profitability declined, Union Carbide implemented a series of cost-cutting measures that systematically undermined safety. The number of operators on duty was cut in half. Inadequately trained workers were assigned to perform complex, critical tasks. Maintenance was deferred, and equipment that should have been replaced was left to deteriorate. One particularly concerning oversight involved the plant's storage tanks for methyl isocyanate. Protocol dictated that a spare overflow tank should be kept empty in case of emergency, but by December 1984, this crucial safety buffer had been allowed to fill, a violation that would prove catastrophic. The warning systems at the plant had also become essentially meaningless. Alarms sounded approximately 20 times per week for routine practice drills, using the exact same signal that would indicate a genuine emergency. Workers had been conditioned to ignore them. Against this backdrop of institutional negligence, the stage was set for disaster. At approximately 11:30 p.m. on December 2nd, workers at the plant discovered a leak. Liquid was dripping from pipes connected to one of the methyl isocyanate storage tanks. When they reported this to their supervisor, he dismissed their concerns, claiming it was just water and saying he would deal with it after the next tea break. But it wasn't water. Inside the tank, a catastrophic chemical reaction was already underway. Water had somehow entered the tank, whether through the leak, through sabotage, or through another route remains disputed, and was now mixing with over 40 tons of methyl isocyanate. The reaction generated tremendous heat and pressure, transforming the liquid MIC into a dangerous gas. By the time the supervisor's tea break ended, the situation had spiraled beyond control. Pressure inside the tank continued to build. Employees attempted to transfer the excess to the spare overflow tank, only to discover it wasn't empty enough to accept the full volume. Other safety systems that should have neutralized or contained the gas were either shut down for maintenance, malfunctioning, or overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the release. Shortly after midnight, the pressure exceeded what the tank's safety valve could withstand. Then, it gave way. Emergency sirens began to blare, but the workers had heard these same alarms countless times before. The initial response was confusion rather than urgency. By the time the true scale of the emergency became apparent, Methyl isocyanate and other toxic chemicals were already shooting into the night air. A brisk wind carried the deadly cloud southward, spreading it across approximately 15 square miles of densely populated neighborhoods. The residents of Bhopal were asleep when the gas reached them. The first symptoms were a burning sensation in the eyes and throat, followed by violent coughing and vomiting. Many woke gasping for air, their lungs filling with fluid as the toxic gas destroyed their respiratory systems from the inside. Families fled their homes in panic, often unable to see through their burning, tearing eyes. The streets filled with thousands of people running in all directions, some toward the hills, hoping to rise above the heavier-than-air gas cloud, others simply running blind. Many collapsed along the way. Some died in their beds, never waking at all. The scene at Bhopal's hospitals was apocalyptic. Thousands of victims arrived simultaneously, overwhelming the medical system. Doctors had no idea what chemical they were treating or how to counteract its effects. They administered what care they could, but for many, it was already too late. The official death toll from that night was initially recorded as 2,259 people. However, these figures have been widely disputed. Many victims died in the days and weeks following exposure without their deaths being properly attributed to the disaster. Estimates suggest that approximately 8,000 people died within the first 2 weeks alone, with another 8,000 or more succumbing to gas-related illnesses in the years that followed. A 2006 government affidavit documented the broader impact. Over 500,000 injuries in total, including 3,900 cases of severe and permanent disability. Amnesty International estimates that 570,000 people were exposed to damaging levels of toxic gas, more than half the city's population. 4 days after the disaster, Warren Anderson, the chief executive officer of Union Carbide Corporation, flew to Bhopal. He was immediately arrested on charges of causing death by negligence. He posted bail the same day, left India, and never returned. Despite multiple extradition requests, he lived the rest of his life in the United States, never facing trial for his role in the tragedy. Union Carbide paid $470 million in 1989 to settle litigation, a sum that works out to less than $1,000 per victim. The company maintained that its Indian subsidiary, UCIL, was an independent entity and that responsibility for the plant's operation lay primarily with Indian management. In 1994, Union Carbide sold its stake in UCIL. The site cleanup was abandoned in 1998. When Dow Chemical purchased Union Carbide in 2001, the new parent company refused to assume liability for the Bhopal disaster, maintaining the legal separation between Union Carbide and its former subsidiary. It wasn't until June 2010, nearly 26 years after the disaster, that anyone was convicted. 7 former UCIL employees, including the company's chairman at the time, were found guilty of causing death by negligence in an Indian court. They each received the maximum sentence allowed under Indian law, 2 years in prison and a fine of approximately $2,000. All were released on bail shortly after the verdict. The investigation into what caused the disaster revealed a web of failures. Operating errors, design flaws, maintenance deficiencies, inadequate training, and cost-cutting measures that prioritized profit over safety. No single point of failure caused the Bhopal disaster. It was a system designed to fail, and on December 3, 1984, it did so with horrific consequences. Today, the legacy of Bhopal endures. The abandoned plant site remains contaminated. Thousands of survivors continue to suffer from chronic health conditions, respiratory problems, blindness, neurological damage, and elevated rates of cancer. Children born to survivors show higher rates of birth defects and developmental issues. The Bhopal disaster stands as a stark reminder of what happens when safety becomes optional, when warnings are ignored, and when corporate responsibility is allowed to evaporate across international borders. Over 500,000 people paid the price for those failures, and many continue to pay it still. The world's worst industrial disaster didn't happen because of unforeseeable circumstances. It happened because prevention was too expensive and human lives were cheap. Thanks for watching. This has been Deadliest Disasters. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. That's the best way to help our channel grow. And if you want to buy me a cup of coffee, check the link in the description or on our channel page. Thank you.